Hey, podcast listeners, it's Ria Wong with you once again. So, this must mean it's Nonprofit Lowdown. I'm so excited because today I am speaking with my friend, Glasa Gottschalk. She is a mentor, a coach, a founder, and we are talking about coaching for BIPOC leaders today. So, Glasa, welcome to the show.
Well, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, I am excited to have you, and we got a chance to hang out in Nashville recently, which was so fun.
It
Had
was so much fun.
so much fun. We ate so well.
Yes. Quite possibly the best meal of my entire life.
Oh my God. I know that meal at Lucas was for real, y'all. Real.
Yeah.
Okay. So before we jump into all of the questions, tell us a little bit about yourself and your career.
Yeah. So I actually came from a small town and had the opportunity to go through a program called Upward Bound, which was really influential in opening me up to other opportunities. I spent about 10 years in the banking industry, rising up the ranks, climbing the corporate ladder, and then decided to hop out into startup environment. I absolutely fell in love with startups and just the creativity and the ability to have an impact and see that create other things in the business. And then I decided to take a gap year. And through that gap year, started a consulting company, consulting leaders and owners on ways to increase their profitability and revenues. And that really led me into what I do now, because I was noticing some links in the way that they showed up and their mindset and the way it was affecting the success and sustainability. And so I got curious and decided, like, how do we bring some more awareness to this to bring the link and to connect the dots? And so in 2020, I transitioned my business and work with leaders and entrepreneurs on their mindset and creating the different outcomes in life that they desire.
I love that you say that because the more I get into this entrepreneurial journey, the more I realize it's all about mindset and like strategies and tactics. You can talk all day long, but it's an inside job. It's just about like, where's your head at? How are you creating the mental acuity and space to thrive and excel? So you, I know, are very passionate about helping folks of color, specifically women of color, in your coaching. So talk to me a little bit as a woman of color for yourself. Where are you seeing the gaps for women of color in the coaching space?
Yeah, this is a big one. There are several gaps, I'll say, in the coaching industry when it comes to coaching people of color and women of color. The first thing that I see is just representation. There is not a lot of representation out there when it comes to having coaches of color. For a long time, the coaching industry has pretty much been for kind of high executive, high performance, high level CEOs, which have been predominantly white men, right? We know that from historical data. And now what we're starting to see is like this influx of coaches coming into the industry, going through coaching certification programs, which kind of set you up for the foundation. But then when they actually get in the industry and they start working with individuals, being in the space of being a woman of color, people of color experience trauma, both lived and observed, right? And that stays with us. There are very real barriers and oppression that exist. And in coaching, in wanting the client to progress and wanting the pursuit of growth fast, we often skip over that trauma or don't acknowledge and validate that trauma or oppression or barriers that exist. And what that does as a coach, right, is if you're creating a space where someone is supposed to show up at their highest self and bring their whole self, authentic self, we have to allow the space for individuals to bring that. And so I see in the coaching industry that we don't do that. We say we're not looking back at trauma, we're only looking forward at progress, or we're not looking at actual oppressive systems that people experience, we're only looking at the opportunities. But the problem is, until you acknowledge those, until you understand what those things are, you can't broaden your view to see the other opportunities that exist, because you're in that pain, right? You're in that hurt of the trauma of those lived experiences. And so in coaching, we see this a lot. I've actually had clients come to me where they don't feel like they can bring that piece of themselves in the coaching space. And we need coaches to do better. We need them to understand the oppressive systems and the barriers that clients are experiencing in real life so that we can leave space to explore that.
Glasa, I'm so glad you said this. So I have a personal story to share. I had a life coach and I was talking to this person. Actually, it was like a series of life coaches. Anyway, talking to them after those Asian women were killed in March. And it was directly after that. And I was experiencing a lot of psychic and emotional pain around that. And the first question they asked is like, well, what are your thoughts about that? And how is it creating your feelings? And I was like, what are my thoughts about that? Seriously? And it was like, there was no discussion of like, this is a really painful thing that has happened that you are experiencing trauma around. And I was just like, I'm done. I cannot with this. So talk to me about how you work with clients to both acknowledge the trauma, acknowledge the institutional racism that we face, and still move forward.
Yeah. So it's a part of our experience, right? When we think about coaching, like in coaching, we talk about kind of these filters that we see the world through. And those are made up of like our values, our beliefs, our experiences, the way we were brought up, religion, spirituality, like all of these play into the way that we show up in the world. And so trauma is a part of that experience. And when I work with clients, one of the things I try to do is to leave space for them to unpack that. Now, I am in no way saying that coaching is a replacement for therapy. In trauma, there is real healing that needs to take place. But what I am saying is there's a place where it overlaps, where you begin to see that my trauma, like I am no longer a victim of my trauma, but I'm taking this story and I want to use it to propel me forward. And so in coaching, what that looks like is holding that space. Sometimes you don't have to progress someone forward in a session. You can just listen. You can hear them. You can ask questions to get curious about what their experience, what are they making that mean about them? What are they taking forward from that experience, and not try to make it an outcome for that particular session. Sometimes just holding and creating that space and acknowledging and validating what they experienced can be the most powerful and healing space that you can provide for a client.
Yeah, that is so deep because I think especially for, the type A people, we're always in problem solving mode, right? Like, I just want to like fix this and move forward. But if we actually operated differently and just allowed space to have a human experience, how might that be different?
Yeah, we're all humans, right? Like we're all going through our life. And as we do this, right, we have a responsibility just to be better humans, to like acknowledge the people around us and their lived and shared experiences, because we're all coming from a different place. And when we come from that different place, when we experience things, we can view them very differently. And so that's why, when you're in the coaching space, if you're not a person of color, this becomes very important to like understand what are these factors at play.
As you're talking, it also reminds me of our mutual friend, Dr. Eugene Choi, and how he talks about the brain being in survival or executive mode, right? And until we can actually unpack the trauma, we can't get into executive mode because our amygdalas are just freaking out and we're just thinking about survival.
Yeah. When first of all, I have to say, I love Eugene. He's amazing.
We all love Eugene, and everyone listening should go back and listen to his podcast interview with me because he is amazing.
Yeah, he's fantastic. And he was one of the people who gave me a really great analogy to show like how trauma carries forward, which is, if we're going through life linear, right? Like if we're thinking about traveling along a line, there becomes a point as people of color, we are at high risk to experience trauma in our life. So something happens right along that line, and there's like, we stop there for a second and we make it mean something about us. And what happens is the feelings that are attached to that, the thoughts that are attached to that progress forward throughout us in life, right? And this is where the healing journey comes in, is understanding the connection about how that traumatic event has influenced and impacted the way that you show up, view things, and engage with the world moving forward. Because without that awareness, we're moving forward just on that survival mode, like on that that pattern, that repetition. Like our mind wants to keep things simple and safe. And so if we continue to do that without actually having awareness of it, then we're setting ourselves up to continue to do the same thing over and over and over again. So awareness 100% is where it starts to move out of that survival brain and into the executive function.
So Glasa, what is the difference between therapy and coaching for folks who are new to even thinking about coaching?
Yeah. So this is a fantastic question. And depending on who you ask, you might get a lot of different answers, but here's how I like to think. Here's how I like to think of it. Therapy is very much focused on a level of like healing and sufficiency. So if we think about you as kind of like a whole person, it's kind of taking a look at the past and kind of healing, mending, and bringing you to a place of understanding and like being able to propel forward, right? So present. Coaching is very much focused on, okay, I'm here and I want to go here. And this is scary, right? I may know how to get there, but I'm super scared to do it. There's some fears or some mindset blocks or things that are making it mean that I can't do, right? But I really want to go there. And so coaching is looking forward of like, how do I take all of this up to where I'm at now and start to unpack it a little? I like to use this analogy of like a suitcase. So you've come through life with like a suitcase and everybody's kind of throwing their stuff on the suitcase. So it's kind of like, you know, you get reprimanded for something and then you make it mean that you're not good enough, or you had situations with family members that happened and you make it mean that you're not loved. So everybody's throwing these kind of pieces of clothing, right, into your luggage, and you're lugging this through life, right? And at a point, you're like, what is this? Why is this so heavy? Why do things feel so hard for me? And in therapy, right, you're kind of taking a look of like, what is this? Oh, this is a red shirt. This is this, right? And you're looking at it. In coaching, we're saying, okay, what of this do I want to keep? And what do I want to let go of? What can I throw out? Do I even want a suitcase? Maybe I want a backpack. Like maybe I don't even want anything. I want to be like free floating, you know? And so you get to decide, you observe all of these things that have impacted you that you've picked up, and you look forward and say, how do I want this to look going forward? What do I want in this bag? Or do I even want this bag moving forward?
I love that analogy. It's so good. It reminds me of like you're kind of like the Marie Kondo of people's lives. You're like, what sparks joy and what are you going to let go of? It's so good.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, Lisa, just to play devil's advocate. So as a coach, much like a therapist, you're not supposed to really bring yourself into the conversation, right? You're kind of a guide, if you will. So why is it important to have a coach who has a similar lived experience? Like, why is it important for you to serve women of color specifically?
Yeah, so this is a very great question and one that I think about quite often. And being in the coaching industry, you are right. Like there's a separation when you enter that coaching space of being a neutral space to kind of reflect and mirror the other person. But I think there's also a place of my experience that comes into play of understanding if I'm witnessing somebody unpack something that is traumatic, because I've experienced trauma in my past, I understand that it doesn't have to move forward in that session. And so for me, I take that shared experience as a place to hold space for that individual, and also to understand that like I'm an example. Like me showing up in the world as a coach, talking about mindset, talking about things that are available, representing women of color, I get to be that example to show them that you don't have to continue down the path that you've been. You can step into that big, audacious goal that you want. And yes, it'll be scary, but it's possible. It's just a matter of you walking into it and understanding the factors that are at play.
So if I'm listening to you, I'm like, Glasa, that sounds awesome. What are the indicators that I might be ready for coaching?
Tell me more about what you mean by that.
Like if I'm listening to you, is it that I've reached a certain plateau in my career? Is it that I feel like I'm not, achieving the things I want to achieve? Is it that I feel like I want a different something different in my life? Like how do I know that I would be a good candidate for coaching?
Oh, this is a good question too. I want to say a lot of people think that coaching is just for, like, I want to start a business and I don't know how to start it. But coaching is really a space where you can bring more self-awareness and understanding about what it is that you want, bringing more clarity. I've had clients that have come in and they're super high functioning. They're like very great in their job. They're working towards their next promotion, but they just want more peace and like joy in their life. I've also had clients come in where they're in a corporate career and they're just kind of tired of the BS and they want to transition out and do something else. And so we work to help them create a plan. So I don't think that it's necessarily that they're unhappy, although being unhappy being discontent can be a really big indicator. But I think it's that you know that there's something else out there for you, but you're just not exactly sure how to create it.
Because I'm really thinking in my own mind about the tension between the internal self and the external world. So I know that, for you, you've talked about being in the corporate world, being in a very sort of macho, predominantly male, white environment. And on the other side, we talk about bringing our whole selves to work or feeling like we're being our authentic selves, right? I think often, especially for women of color, we're in spaces where our whole selves are not fully welcomed. Like the lived
Yeah.
experience is not fully welcomed. And so I guess my question is, how do we reconcile that? Is coaching about reconciling ourselves to succeeding in this world that is not fully welcoming of all of who we are? Or is it about taking your ball and going home and creating your own reality?
Hmm. I don't look at this as like an either or question. Um, I've been in spaces where I've witnessed people show up as their true authentic self, and it is looked at as a negative. Nothing unprofessional, but I'll give you an example. I happen to volunteer for a nonprofit, and our executive director got emotional in a meeting over a very good cause that we were trying to create. And that was deemed as like, don't bring your emotions into the meeting, right? I, being a woman, didn't look at that as like a negative or something that she needed to fix. I looked at this woman cares so deeply for the people that we serve and the impact that we're trying to create that it creates a physical reaction for her. So when I look at this in the broader perspective, it's about what situation are you in currently? You have an opportunity to make a conscious choice about, do I want to show up and be bold and bring in my whole authentic self, and at a risk, it potentially could be at a risk, right? Or do I want to create some new reality? Do I want to find a space where I can be 100% authentic? And I think as coaches, like, it is not our job to make that decision for women. They get to decide because it's a journey. It's not something that we just show up one day and say, I'm going to be myself and like, be the baddest version of myself and the boldest version of myself. It's something that's a journey along the way. And what I've witnessed over time is the more that women start to step into that space, the more that they want to create it for themselves, meaning that they want to step into positions, leadership, or creating companies that create that environment for other women.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that quote. I'm going to mangle it, but essentially it's no measure of health to, I'm going to screw it up, but essentially to change yourself to conform to a sick world, right? And I think that there's so much about corporate culture or even nonprofit culture that is really based in white supremacy. So are we really trying to change ourselves to conform to this, which is, frankly, a very sick structure versus not participating in that? And then the other piece too, and I know you've heard this a lot too, is the ways in which women of color in particular are asked to do emotional labor within the work.
Yeah. So I want to play devil's advocate for a second. It is like the quote you're saying about the sick world. It's like, yes, but we need women in leadership to show up in that manner to be able to create systems of change, right? And sometimes that might take a little bit of compromise along the way in order to reach those areas where they can have the most influence and impact. And so that's what I say when it becomes a conscious choice. Sometimes women decide that I want to take that risk, right? Like I want to be able to maybe be at 80% instead of 100 of authenticity to start moving up the ladder so that I can create that change. Sometimes, right, we had enough. Like we want to throw in the towel and just create anew, but it's not our job to share like what the path is. It's about recognizing the individual and what's important to them. Sometimes making the change from within is more important to an individual than starting their own thing.
Yeah, I really love that, because what I hear you saying is that we all get to have a choice. We all get to decide what we're up for, right? Like, are we up to, change from the inside? Are we up for taking our ball and starting our own thing? Like, you get to be a grown up and decide what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm just like thinking of leadership positions. It's like if Obama would have gotten to the race, it was like, this country is overtly racism and I don't want to rise to the top. It would have never created an opportunity for change. Sometimes we need people who are willing to stay in it in order to create some greater good.
And shout out here to Sheila. She gave me the quote: "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society." So thanks for that, Sheila. All right, last question for me before we open it up to folks in the chat. So if you want to ask Glasa a question, throw it in the chat and I will call on you. So you have said to me in conversations that we've had that leaders' own stuff, quote unquote, creates the environment to be ineffective. So what are some examples of that? And how do we know if it applies to us? Because I think so often, like when I hear about things like, well, what are your limiting beliefs? I'm like, well, if I knew what they were, they wouldn't be a limiting belief, right? It's almost like it's like telling a fish that they're wet. You're like, I don't know. I don't know what water is. I've just been in this little fishbowl my whole life. So talk to me about our stuff.
Yeah. So in my journey through leadership, I've always pretty much been in like leadership and business development. I've noticed these threads. So I've been a person who's been very much in the personal development space. I crave self-awareness. Like I want to understand how I work, how my brain works, everything so that I can operate better. But not all of us are like that. And so I've witnessed through my journey leaders and business owners where they have personal things that are impacting the sustainability and success of what it is they're trying to create. So I'll give you some examples of this. For instance, I consulted with an owner who we were working on building their revenues and increasing their profitability. We were having great success and they were having huge cash flow issues. And so what I came to uncover was that their personal spending was out of control. So it doesn't matter how much income you make if you're not willing to address that, hey, I need to get my personal stuff under control. But leaders and business owners, they don't want to do this because that's scary, right? It's like, I am who I am, that's who I am, right? Or I've seen leaders who we're working on bringing new clients and they are having some attrition, like they're having issues with service from team members that they have. And they don't want to address them because they feel a sense of loyalty because that person has been with them so long. And so instead of like coaching them or moving them to a different position or having conversations about what a transition might look like, they avoid it. And so the impact of that, right, is that you have bad team culture, you're having issues with like income and like clients leaving, and it ripples, right? It creates this ripple effect throughout the organization. And so when leaders experience this, it comes from a place of, oh, if we could only do this, that would solve it. And I think when leaders do that, we need to get a little bit more curious about what is the whole picture here? Like, what are all the factors at play? And what is my part in this? Especially as a leader, especially as a business owner, when we're encountering stuff, we have a part in what that is. We have a part in what it's creating in our business, in our organization. And so I prompt leaders to get curious about, what are you avoiding here? What are the things that are making you feel super uncomfortable? Those are usually the places we need to step into. If you could wave a magic wand and fix it, what would that look like? And then what does that require of you in order to do that? And so those are things that I like to prompt people to get curious about. What is my part in this? What am I owning as part of this situation? Because 100%, I have a part in this because I'm the leader of the organization. I'm the business owner. And so there's an opportunity for them to step into self-awareness there.
I'm going to change tacks a little bit because I think this is it's so important what you're saying. And I think that there might be some misconceptions or stigmas around hiring and coaches, right? It might be like, oh, you're underperforming, therefore you need a coach. On the flip side, I know that organizations and companies are really starting to become very interested in hiring folks of color for executive roles, but without that support, it may not be setting them up for success. So I guess two-part question here is, number one, how do you dispel the myth that coaching is coming from a deficit position as opposed to wanting to level up and be the best version of myself? And second part question, what would your advice be to companies and nonprofits that are looking to hire folks of color and make sure that they are successful in that role?
Ooh, okay. These are two separate questions.
Two separate questions. Sorry, I should only ask one at a time.
The first part I will say, coaches typically don't like to come in if this is like a last ditch effort. And typically in this space, it's because the person hasn't been provided the support or hasn't been provided clear expectations from the get-go. And so instead of really addressing and supporting them in process, it's like, all right, here's like the last ditch. We're going to give you a coach so we can cover our behinds from a risk profile and know that we did everything that we did. And that's really a hard place to come in from a coach, because one of the most powerful spaces to come into as a coach is choice, right? That person isn't being provided a choice. They're being mandated to do that coaching. And so then you have a lot of barriers that come up. Not to say it's impossible, but it's just a much harder space. What I would recommend for individuals is coaching is the space that is powerful for anyone at any level. And so I would look at the most influential people, the people that have the opportunity for the most impact in your organization. And that is a space to really support them with a coach for higher influence and higher impact, right? It's like the 80-20 rule, right? You spend the most amount of energy on those 20% that are producing 80% of the results, because they're going to influence and filter that out. So with that, there is a level of, like, when you're thinking about bringing in communities of color to your organization, I've read a lot of great data on cluster hiring, if it's possible for your organization. So hiring individuals in groups instead of one at a time, it gives them the opportunity to come in as a group and to really be connected and know that other people are going through that shared experience together. There's also a lot of opportunity. They don't necessarily have to be the same level. I actually acquired one of my mentors through this exact process. They had a whole bunch of people coming into a training session. She was a VP. I was starting out as a part-time teller, and we just kind of connected, and she became like my unofficial mentor. And I will credit her largely for my rise through the corporate because she was instrumental in that. So cluster hiring, allowing people from different levels of the organization to be together is a great way to set them up for success.
And I also just want to advocate here for the nonprofits or the companies that are listening, especially if you are a board member, providing support, particularly for your executives of color, is critical. Because I think on the one hand, we often don't think about resourcing people properly. And then on the other hand, I think that there's a reluctance, like, let's just be honest, women of color are reluctant to ask for things for themselves, right? We're told to just like, here are the crumbs, have at it, right? So I think it's both sides. It's as companies and organizations, we have to be ready to provide those resources. And then on the other side, as women of color, we have to be willing to ask for what we want.
Yeah. And I want to add to that too, Ria, because I think this is something like with coaching becoming so popular and such, like there's new data that's coming out about the effectiveness and what it creates in ROI, like return on investment, both in organization and as individuals. I think as individuals, especially as communities of color, if you feel that you're in a space where a coach would help you, ask for it. There is no harm, like regardless of if you're an executive director or, a service manager or whatever, like I feel like there's a huge opportunity where organizations are starting to realize we need to do better about supporting our team. We need to do better about supporting these individuals. The Great Resignation is like a huge example of that. I was reading an article that was talking about like one of the top reasons that people left is one, they didn't feel respected, like they felt disrespected. And two, their work-life balance was like out of control. And so if we think about supporting people with tools and resources, including coaching, right, it provides a better environment for them to be more effective, to create more of those things that they want in their life and in the organization.
Yeah, for sure. And I always just think about like Serena Williams has a coach. I mean, she's retired now, but like she's the best in the world and she has a coach. Like we don't send people out in the world without coaches.
Yeah, but she didn't get there without a coach, right? It started when she was very young. Like you don't just need a coach when you're at the top or when you're like on a meteoric rise. You need a coach from the beginning. You need a coach to really step into that vision that you want to see for yourself and your organization.
Awesome. So we got some questions coming in. I'm going to actually start with Sheila because Sheila, I know you have to get going. So Sheila, jump in here, friend. What's your question?
Oh, you want me to actually ask it?
Yeah, of course I do. Hey, Sheila.
Okay, well, hi. Let me take off my put my video on. Hey.
Hi.
I think, for me, I mean, so my only W-2 position is as an adjunct at a university. I teach. I mean, I have my own business and stuff. And so, but I often encounter this with individuals who are like that I'm coaching or working with who are concerned about the conversation of, oh, there is no professional development budget for its leaders. And so how would you suggest that someone handled that conversation? I mean, I know how I would, but I'd love to hear it from your perspective too.
Great question, Sheila.
Especially if they're not making the budget, right? That's usually when they're at a level that's high enough, but they're not making the final budgetary decisions for their departments or what have you.
Yeah, this is something, and Ria, you can tap into this too, because I know you have experience in talking about this, but this is something where I feel like you have to present a business case because people who are creating the budget want to know the impact that it's going to create. And so this is a space where data becomes very valuable about what coaching creates for organizations as far as like a return on the investment. I also think with companies and organizations looking more at wellness, like holistic, not just mental wellness, but like wellness of their employees, this is a place to be inserted as part of that wellness program, right? Allocating part of this budget for people to have coaches available or to have a personal coach that can help produce more of that wellness in the work environment. And then lastly, one of the cases that I really love is that if you're a high performer or someone who's aspiring to be a high performer, understanding that high performers have coaches, right? In order to be at the optimal level, right? You are in a space where there's a coach that needs to be there alongside you to be able to mirror, to uncover blind spots, to see what's getting in your way. And so when you're presenting this, understanding that, hey, I'm a high performer, or I aspire to be a high performer in this organization. These are the values that I've already added, and these are the things that I want to add. And adding a coach to this will help me get to this place faster. And I think that along with the return on investment creates a powerful case for, hey, this isn't just like money spent in the budget. This is money spent that's going to 5x or 10x what you're putting into it.
Yeah, I double click on that because I often think boards of directors have a very short-term view of expenses. And so what I say is, when you think about expenses, you should make the case of it's either going to bring in more money, it's either going to save time, or it's going to increase operational efficiency. So if you can make the case that a coach can do hopefully all three of those things, but certainly some component of those things, that makes a very strong case. One thing that's triggering me as you're talking, Glasa, and then we'll get to Jessica. I know she has a question. There are people out here in these streets calling themselves coaches. Like, I think it's a very trendy thing for everyone to be like, I'm a coach, right? So how do we know that a coach is actually a coach? Is it about certification? Like, I just feel like I see all these people out here being like, I'm a coach of whatever. And it's like, are you though?
Yeah. So this is a conversation that could be like a whole nother episode of its own. Here's what I'll say. I don't want to talk bad about the coaching industry because I do feel like there's very powerful transformation happening from people being in this space. There's also harm that's being done, I feel like, from inexperienced coaches or people just seeing an opportunity to make money. And so they're, transitioning or pivoting or doing a side hustle in this space. Personally, when I decided that I wanted to really step into bringing self-awareness to leaders, it became very important to me to understand how to do that powerfully. And so I ended up going through a year-long coaching program. So one of the things that I'll say is, if you were going into a doctor, right, and you wanted them to help you be healthy with something, maybe you're like healing something in your body or, whatever, you would want them to be trained, right? Or if you go to the gym, you're going to want somebody who knows how to actually get you into the fitness space that you want to be in. And so in coaching, I think it's important to look at training. I'm not saying it's necessary. There are coaches out there with tons of experience that have went through no certification, but it's something to look at as a piece of the pie when you're going to hire a coach. The other thing that I would look at is, what are the results that they're getting their clients? What testimonials do they have? What kind of impact are they creating? What are people saying about them? I know me and you have talked about, there's so many people out here saying that they'll help you get here. Like, they'll help you make $100,000 or they'll help you have like 5x months or whatever. And they haven't even done it themselves. So understanding what is their experience in that and what is the results that they're creating for their clients specifically, like what testimonials do they have? The last thing that I'll say is, there is a ton of organizations who provide coaches with skills and training. And the one that is largest in the US is called the ICF. It's the International Coach Foundation, which I happen to be a member and certified through. And so you can go to some of these organizations to see if individuals are actually certified through that organization. The last thing I want to say is, there's a very distinct difference between coaching, consulting, and mentoring. And there's a lot of people out here calling themselves coaches that are not actually coaches. They're consultants or they're mentors. So the difference is, a mentor is going to share their experience. Maybe you're going along a career path and they've been where you've been. They're going to kind of share with you the steps to take or what they did in order to get there. A consultant is going to be more in the space of strategy. So they're going to help you understand, when I was doing consulting with business owners, like, where's your business at? Like, what are the revenue streams that you have? How do we get you to increase that? How do we increase your profitability? Okay, we're going to deploy XYZ strategy to get you there. And here's what that requires. That's consulting. And then there's coaching. Coaching is where we don't give you the answers, but we pull the answers out of you. So I'm not here to tell you what your purpose is or where to go or how to get that next job, but I'm here to help pull the answers of, like, what do I want in this life? Why is getting this next job important to me? What are the skills that I'm going to have to learn in order to get there? And so in the coaching space, it's a really powerful space of, like, self-awareness, self-examining, understanding. I talked about the suitcase, understanding all of those factors that are in play that may be deterring you from the outcome that you want.
That's such a good distinction. I'm so glad that you said that, because I do think these sort of things are conflated often. And so it's good to have that distinction. Okay, I think we have time for one last question. Jessica, I see your question. Do you want to jump in here and ask?
Sure. I am in a warehouse right now. So if you hear some background noise, that is what's going on. Yeah, I just wanted to, I think part of your last response helped address it a bit, but just trying to understand, like, the process, because I think I just, like, a couple of months ago, someone told me that they had a coach, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because I do think something that Ria said earlier in the conversation, you able to get access to a role now, but then what is the support to do well in that role and grow in that role? So just wanted to know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, tell me more about what you mean.
Like, I mean, I don't know, like, where do you go? How do you know if someone is the right person for you? When do you know? I mean, I think Ria had asked earlier, like, okay, that, like, if you're kind of looking for certain things, that's the time to do it. But I guess, like, how do I know what the best place to go is, and how do I know that that person is the best person to be the coach or whatever have you?
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. If you're in a place where someone can refer a coach, I think that is the most powerful space, because you have someone who's already kind of co-signing or giving their personal testimony about their experience with them. If you are not in a space where that is possible, looking to a broader network, a lot of, if you have a network, like reaching out to people or individuals that to ask if anyone has had experience in coaching. And then the last thing I'll say is, if you look online, I know this is like a terrible way, but if you look online on what it is that you're trying to create. So maybe you're a coach, or maybe you're a person who it's like, hey, I want to have a better handle on my finances. Look up, like, the top money coaches that are out there. Most coaches too will give you either a consult, some will do maybe like a first free session, so you can get a feel for how they are. You can understand, every coach should have like a process that they work you through. So they should tell you, here's exactly how we're going to get you to where you want to go. And the last thing I will say is, like, trust your intuition. So if you go through that consult, or you go through that call, or maybe you're even looking at them online and you just don't get the right feel or the vibe from them, I would say that's a no. There is a point of connection that has to happen in coaching. And if you're feeling right off the bat that you can't connect and be, like, real with that person, or bring, like, the deepest, like, most vulnerable places of yourself into the coaching space, it's going to be really hard for you to receive the most transformation. This is a space where you want to be able to be like 100, like, there's no sugarcoating here, and you want that person to be 100 with you. You don't want a coach that's going to sugarcoat it. So go with your intuition, go for the consult or the free coaching call, and then go with your intuition on what it is that they're what you feel it is that they're going to create.
It's so funny.
Your question? Oh, sorry, Ray.
Yes, thank you.
It's just funny as you're talking, because I have a couple people I coach, and sometimes they get on the phone, they're like, I'm scared about what you're going to say. And I'm like, are you scared? Or do you know what I'm going to say? Or, like, do you know what you should have been doing?
Yeah. And it's funny, right? Because when you have a coach for so long, it's almost like you'll hear them in your head. Like, what would my coach say in this situation? And they do. They'll call, like, as a client, you'll start calling yourself out before your coach even does, because like you get in that modality of understanding what's coming.
Glisa, I have so many people I work with who are like, I literally hear your voice in my head. I'm like, I'm sorry, but also good.
Yes. Yeah, it's like your little cheerleader and like your truth bomb like happening inside your head.
Yeah, sometimes I'm like your cheerleader and sometimes I'm like mean librarian. It just depends. It depends.
It's all in love though.
It is all in love. It totally is. Okay. This has been so fun, Glasa. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
If folks
thank
want to
you.
get in touch with you, where can they go?
Yeah, so Rita put my website in the chat, but you can head to my website, which is GoToGII, GOTOGII. It's a lot shorter than my name. And that has all my links. I'm on social media. I hang out on LinkedIn. So if you'd like to connect, if you'd like to talk about coaching, even if you're not looking for a coach, but just want to talk more about coaching and like what it takes to find a good coach, like I'd be happy to have those conversations. So don't hesitate to use me as a resource.
That is awesome. And we'll make sure to put all your info in the show notes for folks who are listening on the pod. Glasa, thank you so much. And we actually have to get you back because I want to talk about money. Because I always want to talk about money.
It's one of my favorite topics.
Money, women of color, all of the stuff that we have about money that keeps us from experiencing the wealth. Anyway, I'm about that life.
Yes.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.